She was one of the 10 richest women in Ireland, thanks to an iconic voice that positioned her as a generational standard-bearer of alternative rock. Her unique tone and original style allowed her to become one of the most prominent female artists of all time. She sold over 40 million records with her band, and songs of her authorship continue to be praised all over the world. However, behind the splendor of fame, there was an internal battle that took quite some time to come to light. Her career had its ups and downs, and her relationship with the media was never the best. In turn, there were childhood traumas that never stopped tormenting her and leading her to dark corners. Today, we are going to learn the story of a person who gave a very particular accent to the Cranberries band. A person with unanimous recognition and a personal storm for many years kept secret, which led her to a tragic, sudden, and unexpected death. We are going to go through her childhood, her moments of glory, and the alleys from which she could not escape in her last days. That's why our journey will culminate on January 15th of 2018. The day Dolores O'Riordan died, by the time the tragedy happened, she was 46 years old and was staying at the London Hilton, located in the Mayfair neighborhood. She was in London because that's where the recording sessions were taking place, in which she was reversioning one of the songs that had made her rise to the podium of Idol for so many. The police had entered her room after she had been unresponsive to those trying to communicate with her for a while. The scene was the worst of all imagined. A police officer named Natalie Smart claimed during the hearing to have seen the singer submerged in the bathtub, with her nose and mouth completely underwater. Various bottles of prescription-only medication were found all over the place. While law enforcement did not consider her death suspicious, the investigation was unexpectedly cancelled. Then, the whirlwind, the media fighting for the most scandalous headline, assumptions mixing with accurate information. How was the singer reacting to the diagnosed bipolar disorder she had? Was she responding positively to the treatment, or was she having issues with it? Her closest friends stated that she was terribly depressed. She was also suffering from severe pain due to a serious injury that had never healed properly and had forced her to cancel several concerts. In 2017, to their surprise, some, not without a bit of morbid curiosity, tried to find some answers by reviewing the extensive biography of the woman. According to some American media, the singer had attempted suicide in 2013, due to a bout of depression and mental breakdown. Statements she had made some time ago about her childhood came to light. Everyone was trying to make sense of the event. Everyone was very shocked. The person who, after George Romero, had managed to popularize the word zombie had died. While all the paperwork was being finished so that the investigation seeking to determine the cause of his death could be reopened, an official note assured that Dolores O'Riordan's body was going to be repatriated so that she could be given a huge farewell in her homeland. And to that homeland we will head to learn the beginning of this story. Dolores Mary Aileen O'Riordan was born on September 6, 1971 in Ballybricken, County Limerick. She was the youngest of 9 siblings, 2 of whom died in their childhood. They lived in a farming area and all had to fit into the only 2 rooms in the very small and modest house in which she was raised. Dolores's family had a struggling economy. Her father Terence was a farmer but had been incapacitated for work due to a brain injury caused by a motorcycle accident. In 1968, her mother, Aileen, was a food supplier for schools. They were in a community heavily influenced by Catholic churches, so Dolores had contact with religious music from a very young age. Every time she went with her mother, who was very devout and practicing, to a church, she was mesmerized by the verses sung inside. The little girl enjoyed Jesus' stories. Yes, but she was more moved by the choirs and the voices, which gave the story a unique character that dazzled her. That's why, already at 5 years old, she spent most of her time singing in classes while playing in the same church. It didn't take long for the girl's predisposition for music to lead her to take singing lessons. In record time, she was already playing the organ and singing at the Rapid Temple celebrations. She had found a passion, something that encouraged her to keep going, something that suddenly streaked her gray days with a bit of hope. She loved to sing, and at a very young age, she had already managed to earn a place in the community that applauded her proudly. Some thought that what Dolores felt for music was simply a hobby, something fleeting, that would give way to something else very soon. However, it was not any hobby, and that was definitely not a fleeting love. As a teenager, she continued in the church choir and kept winning the sighs of the parishioners, who did not stop highlighting her great talent. They did not imagine that they were witnessing a musical miracle. Those were the first steps of someone who would become a rock star. Dolores and her family were victims of a fire in their house, so they would be left without a place to live. However, her friends and neighbors, many of them captivated by the little girl's voice, soon got her donations and a new home to live in. In her childhood, Dolores was always rather solitary. During her childhood and adolescence, she showed more inclination to spend time singing, playing with her siblings than meeting with children her age. She often claimed to be one more among the men of the house and used to wear short hair, while avoiding dresses or colorful clothes. This made her, in a society much more prejudiced than today's, quickly earn the nickname of Weird Girl. A nickname which mutated into another one that, although intended to be derogatory, identified Dolores a little more. They called her the girl who writes songs. Why? Well, very simple, because she was not only good at singing, but overnight she had become a great composer. The girl who writes songs was a name she liked much more than that Dolores, which her mother had given her, in honor of the Virgin, Our Lady of Sorrows, also known as the Virgin of Anguish. Her destiny began to be forged with that nickname. In the year 1983, she wrote her first song, which she called Calling. The song was about her first love, who was her school teacher, an older man than her. Although Dolores was influenced by the choirs that worshipped angels and biblical characters in other areas, it was there that she finally found her holy grail. She enjoyed listening to music from bands like Duran Duran and the Smiths. She also adored Sinead O'Connor and Patsy Cline. After her first song, Dolores would never stop writing. Many of her songs have now become anthems. And how did all this career start? With the announcement of a band that said they were looking for a singer? In the year 1989, Dolores left her home under the pretext that she was going to work in a department store. However, the truth is that she was heading to an audition that would change the history of music. It turns out that a band named the Cranberries was in search of a vocalist. The band had been formed by the Hogan brothers and 2 other friends. They had been making some good strides in the music circuit, but the truth is, they were not quite finding the way to break into the big stages. When the band members met Dolores O'Riordan and were able to hear what she had composed, they did not hesitate to give her the position. Suddenly they felt empowered. With that voice at the forefront, things could finally work, and they were not wrong. Soon, the band began to reap successes. At Dolores' suggestion, they changed the name to simply the Cranberries. And the rest is history. They started to play on all radios with a song that denounced the situation in Northern Ireland, a region of the United Kingdom that has suffered armed confrontations between Catholics and Protestants for decades. The song was called Zombie, and it would lead the Cranberries to become one of the most recognized alternative rock bands worldwide. Had Dolores now found her place? Well, the reality is that no, because shortly after, her dreams of fame began to turn into nightmares. Dolores began her performances with some modesty and anxiety. To combat the nerves, she gave many of her first recitals with her back to the audience. "Anyone who becomes famous so quickly and so young will surely be a victim in some way," she would declare in 2012. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The British tabloid press found it very profitable to talk about Dolores, especially emphasizing personal problems or attributing disorders she did not suffer, just to sell more copies and stay in the center of controversy. Despite questions about her explosive popularity, Dolores and her companions moved forward and consolidated their career with the albums No Need to Argue in 1994 and To the Faithful Departed in 1996. Sometime later, Dolores had problems due to a patella fracture, so she had to suspend the Free to Decide World Tour. The media put a particular focus on discussing her anorexia throughout the second half of the 90s, without showing any decency in taking care of the other's integrity. Beyond the fact that the hectic life of a successful artist was complicated for her, Dolores managed to indulge herself and delight the public with different displays of her abilities. One of her great moments of fame was when she performed Schubert's Ave Maria with Luciano Pavarotti at the Pavarotti and Friends Together for the Children of Bosnia concert. Sometime later, that song became part of the soundtrack for the movie The Passion of the Christ. After breaking many box offices, Cranberries split up in 2003. Noel Hogan, Michael Hogan, and Felgar Lawlor continued with their own projects in music, but Dolores had other plans to distance herself from contracts, tours, and stages forever. The stress that all this represented overwhelmed her, and that's why she decided to disappear from the public scene. And she succeeded, at least for a few years in which she dedicated herself to her family and to her inner self. Dolores was married to Don Barton, the former tour manager of Duran Duran. She had her first child. On November 23, 1997 and April 10, 2005, Molly, her second daughter, was born. By the year 1998, she bought a 61-hectare farm called Riversfield Stad, located in Kilmallock County, Limerick, where she lived for 6 years. That place was sold in the year 2004 by the same singer. And she also used her career to reconnect with faith. Let's remember that Dolores remained a believer who later, over time, would proclaim herself pro-life and would be totally against abortion. She had the opportunity to sing for the Pope 3 times at the annual Christmas concerts at the Vatican. Dolores also dabbled in other arts. On several occasions, for example, she appeared on the big screen. The last time she was with director Richard Grieco in the movie Evilenko. She was part of Click, the comedy with Adam Sandler, and her music was on the film's soundtrack. She would end up confessing that working on film sets was too complicated for her. Despite all of this, and even though she tried to dedicate herself to painting for a while, Dolores could not resist giving in to her true calling. Breaking all her internal promises, Dolores returned to recording music, making 2 solo albums, Are You Listening and No Baggage, the first in 2007 and the second in 2009. The results, the expected ones? Again, awards, mentions, and many magazine covers. Around that time, she was also honored by the Board of Honor of the Philosophical Society of Trinity College, Dublin. Again, all the winds were in her favor, and her fans exploded with excitement when in 2010 it was announced that the Cranberries were back in action. After nearly 7 years of inactivity, the band reunited for a world tour, visiting Argentina, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Brazil. But along with the long nights of ovations, of course, the shadows returned. The band suspended almost all of their tour in Mexico due to Dolores' throat condition. No further details were given about her health problems. In February 2012, the band released the album Roses. In the following years, the star would make news, but again for issues far from music. In 2013, the singer revealed one of the most complex and painful episodes of her life. She confessed that a very close person in her environment had abused her when she was between 8 and 12 years old. This revelation was considered by the artist as a cleansing. "I feel that opening up is going to help me," she said at that time. In 2014, the same year she separated from her husband, the star made headlines for assaulting a flight attendant during a trip from New York to Ireland. She avoided conviction by appealing to her bipolar disorder. Despite everything, Dolores did not abandon composition and joined forces with Andy Rook, the former bassist of the Smiths, and Ol Koretsky to work with the band Dark. Their first album, Science Agrees, was released in September of 2016. This new project inherited the essence of the so-called Manchester sound, from which bands like Stone Roses, Happy Mondays, The Charlatans, or James emerged. Already in 2017, the Cranberries released the acoustic album Something Earth, with 10 of their classics and 3 new songs. "I really didn't expect to be as successful as we were," Dolores admitted at that time. "Now we are older, we have children, and I know we will never get those earlier moments back." Was there disappointment, frustration, or a wise acceptance of the passage of time in her? The album release came along with the announcement of a tour through Europe and North America, but this time, to no one's surprise. The tour had to be interrupted because Dolores was suffering from back problems. There weren't many more details about the matter. There would be little left to tell. After that moment, the next time Dolores would make the headlines would be with the news of her death. The investigation into her death was rescheduled for September 6th. The toxicology reports indicated the presence of therapeutic amounts of drugs in her blood, and an alcohol level 4 times higher than the legal limit for driving in the United Kingdom. By then, it became widespread information that along with the pills, several empty alcohol bottles were found at the scene. Was it true that Dolores had not for the first time problems with drinking? Was it true that she alternated periods of abstinence with others of excessive consumption? Again, the most sensationalist media drank from these stories until they got drunk and vomited all their misery. The Irish president, Michael 500 Higgins, was one of the first to pay tribute to 500 Dolores. Soon, tributes began to emerge from the world of music. Among the plans for her funeral was a religious service reserved for her family and closest friends. A 3-day event with Dolores lying in state in an open casket was held from the 20th to the 22nd of January at St. Joseph's Church, where her songs were played, while photographs of the singer on stage and one with Pope John Paul II were placed on the walls. There were, apart from music, many prayers. April 26, 2019. In the end, the 8th studio album by the Cranberries was released for sale through the record label BMG. The vocal part of the album was already recorded when the singer passed away. The other members of the group, after contacting and receiving consent from her family, decided to release the album as a tribute to their bandmate. It is supposed to be the band's last album. This closes a cycle and revalues the figure of Dolores, who represented an entire generation. But she never knew how to fit into the pedestal that the industry insisted on placing her. And although the media tried with a malicious overexposure to focus on her fragility, her legacy was huge and her voice, day by day, continues, gaining strength, vitality, and relevance. And that's the end of today's video. I hope you found the story of Dolores O'Riordan interesting. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications. I also invite you to leave a comment below, suggesting possible topics for future videos. I'll link some recommended videos below to continue your marathon on this channel. With nothing more to add, I bid you farewell. I'm Magnus Mephisto, and this was The Day That.